Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Knicks Film School Pregame Show. My name is Andrew Claudio, a.k.a. GMAC, and it is time to preview another Knicks matchup. This time it's on Saturday night against the Utah Jazz, a team that the Knicks will go on to face that's coming in at losers of fourth straight. Looking at some of the advanced metrics, you can imagine what a 3-12 team will look like. 26th in offensive rating, 28th in defensive rating, 28th in net rating. Obviously, from years of thinking of fake trades, we know about Lauri Markkanen, whose scoring is down this year, but is still shooting 42.5% from three. It's their one trip to Utah, and rarely do we get the chance to, when we preview this matchup, do we get the chance to bring someone back into the family that the Knicks world let get out. And I am honored to be welcomed once again from the drive with Spence Checketts from 2 to 6 p.m. I believe that's Mountain Time in Utah on ESPN700 or 92.1 FM in Utah. Spence Checketts, welcome back to the Knicks Film School Podcast.
Andrew, thanks for having me, man. Excited to be here and excited to talk about the two teams that have dominated my entire life, the Jazz and the Knicks. So
yes.
Excited for tomorrow.
Two teams in somewhat opposite directions at the moment, which I don't, no shade whatsoever, which is actually my curiosity to start things off here, where, you know, you do your over-unders before the season and you see a Jazz team that I believe is well coached, that has an all-star that they extended this offseason, had some pieces that I wanted the Knicks to potentially trade for last year or maybe during the summer. And you don't really think of it being 3-12 after 15 games with the advanced stats profile that I just laid out. I mean, just from the state of the Jazz, actually, I want to go a different direction with this question because you talk on local radio. I more want to know the state of the fan base. Like, how much are the Jazz being brought up in your day to day? Is it mostly? I know BYU just lost to Kansas and they have a big game this weekend against Arizona State, I believe. So does that drive the conversation, or do the Jazz get brought up as a disappointment this year?
Yeah, good question. We're pretty college football centric right now. We're the broadcast partner for Utah football. Has not been a great year for Utah football, but has been a great year for BYU. And BYU football being good is like it's like a rising tide because BYU fans love content. But we're an NBA show in a lot of ways. You know, that's really my life and my career, prior to being in the media, being on the other side, on the team side in pro basketball, doing a little scouting. It's what I know. And it's where my Rolodex takes me. So we have a lot of big NBA guests. You know, we do an NBA Daily Assist segment every day. And so I have to force feed Jazz fans topics because they're just not a very interesting team. And honestly, they're not moving the needle a ton right now. I will tell you this, the building's still sold out. The tickets are being bought. Fans are still showing up. In a way, we're, being a small-ish market, a growing market, with pro hockey here now. And I had to, do a double take a few weeks ago when the Utah Hockey Club was at Madison Square Garden playing the New York Rangers. Neil Smith is a regular guest on my show now, so we're talking a lot of hockey. But in a lot of ways, we're a little bit like Green Bay of the NFL, where everybody goes to the Packer games no matter what. And everybody will go to Jazz games no matter what because we love the Jazz here. But we're also – it's weird because we're a spoiled fan base in a way. We've never won a championship, but we were not usually this bad.
Right.
And when we are this bad, we've had very smart decision makers traverse their way out of the space quickly to get the team back to somewhat contention relatively quickly, but they are not even close. So this is as bad of a team as we've had here probably since Tyrone Corbin's last year, which was 2013. But, Dennis Lindsey took over, they draft Gobert, they draft Mitchell, and suddenly Quinn Snyder's hired, and boom, we've got a good 8-year run. And to your point about them being well coached, I very much like Will Hardy. And he's had his 5th-year option picked up. I bring it up because this is his 3rd year. So they picked up year 4, and then about a month ago, they announced they picked up year 5. So they're riding with him. But the personnel isn't good. They're not doing anything well. You referenced some of the advanced metrics. They're 21st in true shooting. They're 24th in effective field goal percentage. They're 20th or worse in pretty much everything outside of offensive rebound percentage because they can't shoot. So there's a ton of offensive rebounds available. They're the worst team in the league in turnover percentage. So the percentage of turnover or percentage of possessions that lead to turnovers, the Jazz are the worst. And then everybody scores off the turnovers. They're worst in the league in allowing points off turnovers. They really don't do anything well. And I think it's by design because the last 2 years they've been pretty good. And then they've broken it down after the trade deadline, which is way too late. And then you're drafting 9 through 12. So this year with Cooper Flagg, Ace Bailey, you guys know all the names. There's 5 or 6 apparently franchise-changing players. Only time will tell. I never trust rookies, even a Cooper Flagg. They want to hang on to their draft capital because it's top 10 protected. And by the way, it's top 10 protected to guess who? Oklahoma City, because
of course
the city owns everybody's draft capital. So this year they very much want to keep that pick because the draft is so good. So there's going to be a lot of losing. And to bring it back around, the fans are showing up, but I don't think they're all that engaged. But I think they kind of understand the plan.
So first of all, you brought up things that they potentially do well and go to offensive rebound percentage. I just want to note it. I literally wrote down the one thing because when I go looking through my notes to research a team, regardless of what their record is or what their net rating might be, it's like there's got to be one thing that I can point to and say, all right, that's something I have to worry about. And ironically, that is a way the Knicks have been beaten this year is on the offensive glass because they're prioritizing their first shot these days. I mean, Josh Hart can be a bit of a rebound demon at times, but I mean, we'll talk about that matchup in just a second. Look, you said it, the fact that the top of this draft is supposed to be generationally good. Knicks Film School listeners know about my side hustle over at the Game Theory podcast with Sam Vecini.
I love Sam. Yeah.
I've been doing nothing but editing videos about the 2 Rutgers kids, and they have a kid from BYU that's supposed to be at the top of the draft, right?
Igor Demin kid.
Yeah. His tape looks pretty impressive. His shooting form seems to have really taken form this year. So there's supposed to be some really important prospects. And the Jazz, it's not just their pick, but they do have the Minnesota pick this year unprotected. They do have the Cleveland pick, although that may end up being 30th this season. Right. Figures this is the year that happens. But I guess it's a change in expectations, right? It's going from, seeing what Will Hardy could do with a Colin Sexton or a Lauri Markkanen. Maybe there's like a 30 to 35 win team. And this year it's going the other direction. So it's why it's interesting to hear about how a fan base can live through a year like this and follow through a year like this. I am curious about who the keepers are, though. And if you have any insight on who do you think will be around when this team is ready to be good again?
Yeah, it's a good question and one we debate often. Markkanen's the easy answer. They love him. He seems to love it here. And what we do here in Salt Lake, because we're not New York or Miami or LA, we love it when you love us. So if you tell us you want to be here, we love you because we've been able to capitalize and really, do 2 things very well, which is draft and develop. The third piece of the puzzle is retain, and we can't do it. So in a market like this, and not even in a market like this, I mean, we often do things like, it's Salt Lake, you have to do things a certain. Well, Golden State drafted, developed, and retained really well, and then it allowed them to add Andre Iguodala, later Kevin Durant. But we've been able to draft Gordon Hayward, develop Gordon Hayward. We couldn't retain him. Draft Rudy Gobert, develop Rudy Gobert, and Danny Ainge elected to trade him. Donovan Mitchell, draft, develop, he's gone. So when you look at what we have here now, Markkanen's under contract for 5 years. But there's so many things that have to fall into place for them to be good, even within 5 years, which is the problem. And other than that, honestly, I don't know who's going to be here when they're good. The developmental process took a step back when Taylor Hendricks broke his leg, which was such a bummer because Taylor, he's the sweetest kid. He's a good kid. He works his tail off. He showed up after an off season. And I always roll my eyes when I fire up NBA TV and it's like training camp time and all the coaches are like, yeah, he's 15 pounds stronger. It's like muscle gain season every time players show up for preseason. But it was real for Taylor. It was real. He showed up. He looked good. And then he went down with that broken leg, and he's not going to play all year and probably not until halfway through next season. There are some things to like about Keontae George, but I don't know, man. I don't know. Like, I really think he might settle in as a backup combo scoring guard, but they already have one in Jordan Clarkson, and they kind of have another one in Colin Sexton. So there's like redundancy with those three. They like Taylor Hendricks. I think he'll be here for a while. And you know who's probably been their best rookie was the kid they drafted last of the three, and that's Kyle Filipowski out of Duke.
Flip, yeah.
Yeah, he's played pretty well. Cody Williams has a marathon in front of him. Man, it's a good question at this point. I would say Markkanen will be here. I think they trade Colin Sexton. Look, all you need to know about this team, if you're an NBA fan, is their best player right now is John Collins. Okay, yeah. He's their best player. I'm sure they trade him, but nobody wants to take $26 million and pay John Collins. So, long way of answering your question. I'd say it's Markkanen. I like what I've seen from Filipowski, but he's played 15 games of pro basketball, and beyond that, I think there are a ton of question marks right now.
So that begs a follow-up about Danny Ainge and negotiating with Danny Ainge. And I may be coming at this from the perspective of a Knicks fan that remembers the summer that didn't end in Donovan Mitchell. I also remember this past summer when the Knicks were looking for a center and the rumors about the Knicks wanting and having interest in Walker Kessler were out there. But they were not willing to meet Danny Ainge's asking price. And I guess I'm just curious, like, do you see Danny being a little bit more willing to negotiate this deadline or this upcoming offseason with some of these veteran pieces that won't be here long term? Or do you think this is just like how he is? Like, if I have a price, if it's not met, I'm not budging.
You know, it's funny. I had an opportunity to go down to Scottsdale and play in Steve Young's charity golf tournament this last weekend, and Danny was there.
That's a flex. Well done.
Yeah, that's it. Not even a humble brag. That's a straight name drop.
A little bit. Yeah, don't hurt your back picking up those names you drop.
No shame over here. And you know, every time I see Danny, I try to kind of kick the tires with him to see where he's at. And I hate to say this, he strikes me as a guy that very much enjoys playing golf, that very much enjoys being with his family. And I think this is more of a Justin Zanuck run operation now, their general manager. And Danny's kind of like this godfather figure who Ryan Smith grew up idolizing. And when I talked to Ryan about the hire, another humble brag, no big deal, talk to the owner. He said, well, he calls him DA. The initial thing gets a little exhausting. But he says, well, if DA is going to, because Danny moved back to Utah after he left Boston, he said, if DA is going to live here, he's going to be involved. And I honestly don't know how involved he is. I really hesitate to say that. It just feels like Zanuck is the one that's really doing all the hard work day to day. I don't know if you're an Office fan. It's like Zanuck would be Jim Halpert and Danny Ainge would be Michael Scott in the whole like day to day big picture stuff, right?
Got it. Okay.
So I really think if teams are calling, they're talking to Justin. And Justin's also a guy that's going to – I mean, he had his fingerprints all over the Mitchell stuff, all over the Gobert stuff. But I wouldn't be stunned. Like, you referenced Walker Kessler. And the Jazz front office this year, prior to the season, their media availability, they leaned into one thing. They said it's development. Okay, we are playing the young kids, which if you've been around NBA basketball, it's code for we're going to be really bad this year, okay? But Walker Kessler is the only player that is now in year 3 under Will Hardy. So if their developmental program is working, Walker is going to be a case study. And he's been fine. He hasn't been bad. There have been some games where he's been downright dominant, but he loses focus. He doesn't set great screens. I think he could be had. And I actually think a team like the Knicks or other teams that need centers will be calling Utah because they have Walker Kessler. They have Drew Eubanks. I mean, say what you want about Drew Eubanks. He could step in and, fill some minutes until Mitchell Robinson is healthy. He's probably better than Jericho Sims. I don't know. That's not it's not a great compliment on who he is as a player. The Jazz have 3 or 4 bigs that I think could be had if teams want to call. Because I think at this point, they don't even know who's around for the long haul. They're just trying to figure out answers. So Walker could be available. But yes, I think they continue to be very much open for business. I believe that.
I think the Knicks the Walker Kessler interest was very much a before Karl Anthony Towns type
Sure.
of thing. So that's where I think the Knicks might be tapped out just on assets that Ainge might be interested in.
Right.
I know if they're looking to use Mitch's salary or this one Washington protected pick that they still have, they'll probably look to get a wing if they can find one. But it's more of a question about the Jazz operation. If you're telling me that my ire should not be directed at Danny Ainge for really driving a hard line with a center that couldn't crack the rotation in summer league this year, then I guess I should direct it at Jim and less at Michael Scott, which I'm more than happy to do. This matchup, I mean, I don't mean to have PTSD of Knicks past of them potentially playing down to their opponent, because they haven't this year. They've taken care of business largely. But there's always in the back of your mind, like, well, what if a team just comes in and does the thing they do well, right? Like, and do it really well for that night. So when it's looked the best, what has happened? Like, what have the Jazz done when they've looked the best so far this year?
Good question, because let me look at this real quick. The last 5 or 6 games, their offense has been much better. Now they're losing, right? Because they don't guard at all. But the last, let's see, it started with the Suns game. They've gone over 112 points in 5 of the past 6 games. They're shooting a little bit better from 3. What Will does very well, he's an offensive coach. He preaches spacing. He preaches ball movement. There's not one isolation guy on this roster. This is not a 1-4 flat, give it to Jalen, make a play. This is, and even Markkanen's not an isolation player.
Right.
He can post up smaller players and he can take a big off the bounce, but you're not going to isolate Markkanen to get offense. They need to share the basketball. And the last 5 or 6 games, the offense has been better. But if the Knicks roll in and just do what they've been doing offensively, they're going to hang 140 on one of the worst defensive. They were the worst defensive team last year. They're much better this year. They're 28th. So you can get out in transition on them. You can turn them over. Everybody was talking about the Dalton Connect game the other night. I could have made those threes. Those were spot up, white boy, shooter from the outside threes. Okay? And last time I was shooting like that was in New Canaan High School in 1996.
We call those let him shoot threes. And whether you're at LA Fitness or we're on the park, wherever you are, let him shoot. Let him shoot. Next thing you know, he's 9 for 14.
Right. And of course, because it was Los Angeles, ESPN the next day is pissing those highlights all over the place. I'm like, have you noticed he has 5 feet of airspace? So the Knicks will get wide open shots. Offensively, they will get whatever they want. If they have an average offensive night, they'll hang 120. If they're knocking down shots, they'll hang 140. And I would be stunned if this is even the Knicks. I would be stunned if it's less than a double-digit spread. I think New York is going to run them off the floor.
I believe it opened at 12.5. I haven't checked it recently. I would be shocked if the money went toward the Knicks on this. You hinted at it that if the Knicks and the second best offense in the league right now, if they come in and take this seriously, they should be able to score a ton.
Yeah.
I will say they are giving up a ton of points. Gave up 122 to Phoenix without Durant and Beal the other night. They also, that's where any fear I have of this game is that you mentioned Utah being better in their last 5 games. 116 offensive rating, which is good for 8th in the sport over the last 5 games, if you sort it that way on NBA.com. So look, they're scoring the ball. Markkanen's looked good the last 4 games, despite it being a 4-game losing streak. But the Knicks come in with this really good offense, one of the best in franchise history. And one of my last questions I have for you, as somebody who may or may not have a bit of reference when it comes to your perspective on what the Knicks have been in years past, what Tom Thibodeau has emphasized on the defensive end in years past. I just ask you, Spence Checketts, a bit of a historian of the Knicks in the 90s. How surreal is it for you that the Knicks might have their best offense in franchise history right now, and it's being overseen by Tom Thibodeau at the moment?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I love it because I love Tom. I'm a big Tom guy. And here's another humble brag. Whenever I am watching and they're playing well, I reach out to him just to tell him how happy it makes me to see him on the sideline, because I always harken back to those Knick 90s teams as my favorite teams growing up, going to the Garden and watching them grow. And I'll always kind of wish that the identity of a Knick team is still similar to that, but they never got over the hump. Just like our teams out here, they were close but couldn't. Michael Jordan took like 7 rings off my father's fingers. Unfortunately, that's just kind of the deal. I guess 6 technically, but
did that to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that they're interesting again. I feel like it's been a number of years. It's the Garden, so fans are going to show up, but the Garden sounds different now. It's different when it's a full Garden and it's just more of like the scene as opposed to a full Garden and the team is fun. What's not to love about Jalen? His dad, Rick, was one of my counselors at 5-Star Basketball Camp back in the day.
Oh, wow.
And so I love the team. Now, I will tell you, I'm not a cat guy. I've never been a big cat guy. But I understand why you do it. I understand why you take the risk. And I give Tom a lot of credit because Tom had cat before, right? And so I don't know if this is Tom maturing. I don't know if this is Tom thinking differently, but he had to play this way if they were going to make that deal, right? Because if you have Cat on your team, it's kind of like Larry Brown and Allen Iverson, right? Like you have to play a certain way when you have a certain talent on your team. Cat is never going to be a great defender. And really, he's kind of like a Carlos Boozer type rebounder. It's not necessarily effort. It's like you're big and you're in the right spot, so you're going to grab some boards. But he is one of the most uniquely talented offensive bigs that the league has ever seen. And that was the scout on him coming out of school. Like, this guy is different at that size. So I love what they've done. I was a little concerned about their defense and rebounding because come playoff time, you still have to do that, right? So maybe getting Robinson back will help. The Hartenstein thing hurt. But they've been fun. They're relevant. And I'm thrilled that it's Tom doing it. Believe me, I'm very happy about that.
So obviously, I also grew up in the 90s watching the Knicks and falling in love with teams where, you think to the chance of defense in the Garden in unison with the organ, right? So like, it's weird to have like I have no idea whether to call the Knicks contenders or not. I would put them in the conversation. I don't know if I'd put them anywhere near front runner status, but like, they're back in contender conversations, and we're not going to be chanting defense anytime soon at the Garden. We just may be winning every game by double digits because nobody can stop us on the defensive end. So it's an adjustment. And to your point about not being a cat guy, I wasn't either. And Dirty Dancer in the live chat says probably 95% of us are converted cat guys now. Like,
hey, it's worked.
Yeah, he's looked great.
And by the way, the 2-man action with he and Jalen, that's tough.
Yeah.
Right? And so I watched the Suns game the other night, and yes, they were without pieces, but it was smooth. And look, he is uniquely skilled. So I've always been a get the talent and figure it out guy. And, I think most everybody realized that the group last year was going to go as far as Julius Randle was able to help them go because he was their second best offensive player. And there are nights, like I know Chris Finch has spoke glowingly about Randall, and there are nights Julius looks really good, but Cat's twice the player he is. And there are other nights. Rui Hachimura opening night said on the post game that their scout on Julius Randle is that he stands around, so just run by him.
Yep.
Like, that's the scout for a pro basketball. Like, he just stands there, so if you just run by him, you'll have a layup. And like, you can't win with guys like that. And I loved Dante. Like, I was sad to see him go. But you only have, in this league, you just have windows that shut really, really quickly. And look, if you've been watching the league, it's Boston and it's everybody else. It just is. But the Knicks are in the conversation with everybody else. I would take them over the Cavs, and we'll see if Philly can figure it out. My goodness. But I do think it's Boston and everybody else. But I think at the top of the everybody else category, I put the Knicks, which makes me very happy. I'm excited to watch them come playoff time for sure.
As am I, of course. I'm also I'm incentivized from like a business standpoint too, like here at Knicks Film School. So of course I'm hoping for a very deep playoff run as well. Spence Checketts, thank you so much for joining me. We have people watching live. I should have said he's got a bit of a time constraint. Do you have time for one question?
Yeah, let's do one more for sure.
Okay, so I'm gonna pick my favorite question in the chat. Okay, so one's a joke from Bernard Richardson. Apologies, I can't put these on the screen. StreamYard is acting up. Apologies, people watching. But Bernard Richardson asks, how will Embiid look in a Jazz uniform? Would that be a match? They got the assets. They could trade for him. I don't know if that's happening.
It's really obviously that is in jest, but it's the one thing that folks around here are holding on to, because one undeniable reality of this new collective bargaining agreement that I think they're going to have to walk back.
Mm-hmm.
We now know what scares billionaires, and it's called the second apron. They just don't want it. Look, I know a lot of rich people. They all have one thing in common. They don't like to lose money. No matter how much money they have, they don't like to lose it. So, we've already seen it adversely affect Denver, the Clippers,
Milwaukee,
yeah. Right? And so if there is Milwaukee's played better as of late, but to start, it was horrible. Or Philly or whatever. If there's some owner that's like, I'm paying too much, this team is horrible, the Jazz are uniquely positioned to make a good offer. But I'll go back to my original point. Do you go all in on a player that might leave in 2 years? You know what I mean? So and by the way, if you add a Joel Embiid to this roster, what does it do?
That's like a 7 seed, and he might not play enough to get you to the 7.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they're 3 or 4. Like, everyone's like, oh, you put Cooper Flag next to Marketer next year. I'm like, and what? And what exactly are you? You've got something to work with, but you're still 3 or 4 pieces away from even being decent. They're a long ways away, but they are in a spot where if there is a team that doesn't want to pay the money for an average record, but they have some talent and they just want to get rid of it and reset, the Jazz are in a spot where they could potentially bring in some talent. So we'll have to see. Yeah,
the aprons are interesting, because it'd be one thing if it was just a tax penalty and then you'd really see who the cheap billionaires were. Mm-hmm. They're so constrictive, or I guess restrictive, on like what you can do as a team.
Right.
If you're over the second apron, that's almost what less incentivizes you to make moves to avoid, like the moves the Knicks made this summer. The fact that they're still under the second apron is actually impressive. And that was by design. They weren't going to make either of them without making sure they didn't hard cap themselves at the second apron. So
Leon's doing a good job, man. He really does, so you got to give him credit. I love that they're interesting again. I'm going to be back there next week for Thanksgiving. I'm going to try to get in and see a game. Hopefully I can make it in the Garden. It's been a few years.
Well, so I have no idea how long you're in town for, but they're on this 4-game road trip at the moment. So I hope you're in town long enough that they are at least there when you can go see them. I believe they're back the following Monday, the Monday or Sunday against Orlando.
Okay.
After Thanksgiving.
If it's Sunday, I can make it happen. I've got to get back on Monday, but we'll see.
Gotcha. Well, I hope you are able to get back to the Garden for a game soon, because they're good, they're fun, they're interesting, and they're scoring a ton of points at the moment. Spence, thank you so much for joining me for this edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show. Before you get out of here, please let the fine folks at home know where they can find you and all the work that you do.
Yeah, just I'm on all the socials. It's just my name, which is Spence Checketts, and you can stream the show online, ESPN700sports.com. We have a mobile app. We have a podcast, of course. The show is called The Drive with Spence Checketts, and we talk a lot of NBA basketball. And even though I'm in Salt Lake, my heart still is in Midtown Manhattan, so we talk a fair amount of Knicks, believe it or not.
Well, if you want to go get your Knicks takes out of Utah, you know exactly where to go, Knicks fans. The link is in the description of this episode. Spence, thank you so much for joining me. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show. If you dug it, please head over to iTunes, drop a 5-star rating and a review. If you're watching live on YouTube, please like this video. Remember to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us long term. John will be doing the post game on Saturday after the Knicks take on the Utah Jazz. And I will be back again on Monday at noon to preview the next Knicks matchup. But until next time, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the game on Saturday, and I will speak with you soon.